Welcome back to The Legal Trans Woman, where we advocate for trans and gender variant humans in Minnesota and Illinois, and in the whole of America and in the whole of the world. You've got me back, Ellie Krug. Thank you for giving me some of your time today. Once more, we have a very impactful show, and I'm going to start out with a very heavy topic. I'm giving you now a trigger warning because the topic is about suicide. Not only just suicide, but suicide of a young person. And so a trans girl who had so much promise in the world. So I am giving you this trigger warning, all right, because I want to, if this is going to be too much for you, it is okay to pass on today's show. All right. I totally get it. The big interview is more upbeat. You know, I'm going to be hitting you both different ways here. The big interview, on the other hand, is far less heavy and offers hope about rugby and trans people playing sports, and about a sports journalist and his photographer who are willing to do like the hard work of getting to know trans people. You're going to love the interview of Kyle Goon from the Baltimore Banner, okay? But because this is a particularly big story about May Pollard, the young trans woman who died in Boise, this commentary about her story will carry over into News Bites, just so you know that, okay? So we're going to have heavy, we're going to have something to uplift you, and we're going to go back to heavy. So I'm sorry, please bear with me, okay? All right, and then I will have random acts for you at the end. Now, for the big story. As I said, it's very heavy on the heart, but it's also reality, and it underscores what I've been talking about ever since Donald Trump regained the White House and took the offensive against trans people in so many ways in our country, particularly younger trans humans. And please recall that I am well acquainted with suicide. You know, my father, he took his life 26 years ago. Much of what follows, okay, is from a July 18th NBC News piece by Joe Yurkaba. Thank you, Joe Yurkaba, for doing this piece, and thank you for NBC News for doing it, because this is incredibly important. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you know that I have talked repeatedly about certain states that particularly target transgender people, like Florida, like Texas, like Kansas, and like Idaho. Most recently in Idaho, on Transgender Day of Visibility at the end of March this year, Idaho's governor signed off on a law that made it a crime for transgender people to use any public restroom in that state where the restroom aligned with the transgender person's gender identity, okay? But that was not the first law in Idaho. If I understand correctly, Idaho has passed, I think, 14 anti-transgender laws in one way or another. I mean, how many transgender people are there in Idaho? But this, of course, is always about stoking fear, about riling up the conservative base, okay? But in July of 2023, there was another anti-trans law that took effect in Idaho, and that law was aimed at schools and education. And that law directed Idaho's schools to ban transgender students. And usually we're always talking about trans girls, okay? But ban transgender students from using restrooms and locker rooms in the schools that align with their gender identity. Now, in response to that 2023 law, Lambda Legal, the great Lambda Legal people who take up all kinds of legal causes involving the queer community, particularly involving the trans community, in response to the 2023 law, Lambda Legal filed a lawsuit in federal court challenging the school restroom ban. Now, there were 2 high school students as plaintiffs in that Lambda Legal lawsuit. One of them was a then 15-year-old transgender girl referred to as, quote, Jane Doe in the lawsuit. The real person behind Jane Doe in the Lambda Legal lawsuit was a trans girl named May Pollard. She lived with her mother in Boise. May had started to experience gender dysphoria. And again, gender dysphoria is that intense discomfort, emotional pain that comes from when your brain does not match your body. She had begun to experience gender dysphoria in 7th grade. And she was depressed. She was agitated. All the kinds of signs that you have when you have gender dysphoria. And to her credit, May's credit to begin with, she came out to her father. Her parents were divorced. Her father's name is Joseph. She came first out to Joseph, who expressed that he loved May regardless, okay? And that, her being trans was not an issue for him. God love you, Joseph. And then it took May a bit longer to come out to her mother, Elise, with whom she lived. But when she did, and Elise, in this reporting from NBC News, said that she knew that something was up about gender with May, and she just prayed that May would trust her to come out, and May eventually came out to her mother, and her mother also was loving and supportive. So May had what many transgender kids and youth don't have. She had 2 loving and affirming parents willing to help her in any possible way. You would think that would be a recipe for success. But despite that love, despite that affirmation, May still struggled with suicidal thoughts. Fueling those thoughts, in part, was the stigma around being trans in a state that went out of its way to target transgender kids. Now, some of that targeting involved prohibiting gender-affirming care. Okay, Idaho had banned that. May had experienced emotional trauma trying to get hormones. It took her months before she could access gender-affirming care, and she could not access it in Idaho because it was banned. She could access it, though, over in Oregon. And to give you an idea of the degree of love that May's parents had for her, and you're going to hear the emotion in my voice here. This story altogether is emotional, but to show you the degree of love that May's parents had, May's mother would drive her, Elise would drive her to Oregon to get her hormones, to see a doctor, okay, and then drive back to Idaho. It was a 13-hour round trip drive multiple times over, several months. Okay, but her mother did that because that was necessary to help May transition, to help May's mental health. May also wanted to transition surgically. Okay, now, but again, you've heard me say this before on the shows, no doctor will provide, what's called bottom surgery, making an outie into an innie, okay, if you're under age 18, all right? So May was going to have to wait until she turned 18 in 2028. But her mother, she knew that there would be a cost. Her mother took on a second job to start saving money for May's surgery. I mean, again, the degree of love. Her parents did other things. They helped her find a Boise support group. They encouraged her to become dear friends with another transgender girl. Okay, they did all of that. But despite all of that love, okay, the stigma would not go away. And much of it was fueled by being required to use the school restrooms in the nurse's office or another building, because May could not use, under Idaho law, she could not use a restroom that aligned with her gender identity. And so when the lawsuit was filed naming her Jane Doe with Lambda Legal, okay, she had to file an affidavit to say how this law was impacting her. And in her affidavit, this is what she said about having to use, the nurse's restroom or a restroom in another building across campus. She wrote, quote, "I just want to fit in. It is upsetting to think that I may have to go through the rest of high school without access to something as basic as the ability to use the same restroom as everyone else," unquote. May expressed her pain through poetry. One poem demonstrates the kind of pain that she was experiencing. In that poem, she wrote, quote, "Tired, mired still, I soak into the carpet. Little brittle chill, remind me that I don't fit." Obviously, it's a poem about taking her life. I mean, my goodness, it was very clear, okay, incredibly clear about how difficult this was for her. Now, I've got to take a break. We're going to have the big interview, and when I come back, I'm going to give you more details about May Pollard. Thank you for letting me break this up, because we do need something uplifting right now. You're listening to me, Ellie Krug, on The Illegal Trans Woman. When we take our break, we'll be back. If you like what you hear, go visit my website at Ellie Krug. Email me if you want to about this show in particular, elliekrug@gmail.com. We'll be back in a sec. And we're back. Ellie Krug with The Illegal Trans Woman. It's the time for the big interview, and I'm just really thrilled about having Kyle Goon on the show. He is a sports journalist with the Baltimore Banner. Previously, he had been a sports columnist, writer for the Salt Lake Tribune and the Orange County Register. Kyle Goon, welcome to The Illegal Trans Woman. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm thrilled, and I wanted to have you on the show because you dropped the Banner, the Baltimore Banner, dropped a piece on Monday about a couple of rugby teams in Maryland, Division III rugby teams, that have bucked, I think that's about the best phrase we can use, the Trump administration relative to its edict against all sports entities in America that they could not have trans athletes participate on those teams, where the athletes are identifying according to their gender identity. And you dropped this wonderful piece about rugby. Give us a quick synopsis of what the landscape is, about what the Trump administration is doing for, sports that would compete potentially in the Olympics. We're filtering down. We don't need to talk about high schools. My audience is well aware of that. But what else are they doing and going on that may not have as much notice?
Yeah, there's been a widespread, push from the White House and to Baltimore, it's a significant trickle down, right? So,
Right.
the team I wrote about, the Baltimore Ferals, a women's plus team, in Division III rugby, which is the lowest level of rugby. It's just weekend warrior types, hobbyists, people who are playing their first team sport and ever sometimes. And then they got an edict from USA Rugby in February banning trans women specifically, not trans men, trans women and girls from all women's and girls play in all divisions. USA Rugby is getting pressure from the U.S. Olympic Committee, which is getting pressure from the Trump administration. So the U.S. Olympic Committee in the last 2 years has put pressure on its federations, its national governing bodies, including USA Rugby, to issue trans bans in all their sports. And the threat has been, okay, if you don't, we'll take away funding that we give to you. We'll take you out of the Olympics, and we'll decertify you. And Bill Gorin, who's the CEO of USA Rugby, has said those first two are survivable. The last one isn't.
Right.
Basically, in theory, the Trump administration could create its own regulatory body to run all of rugby. So USA Rugby, in the interest of kind of protecting things for its greater membership, issued a ban on trans women at all levels of competition.
Right. And let's talk about the levels. So they've got, is the highest level the elite level for the USA Rugby?
Yes, women's elite rugby is the highest level. So, I mean, we're obviously well outside the bounds of what I reported in the story, but I did a lot of reporting beyond what's in the story. So I know that women's elite rugby had invited members who were trans women to roster spots. Then when the ban came down in February, had to immediately kind of go back on that. Some women had moved. It's a big deal. At the highest level, they are abiding by this ban. Even though there's some protests, you can kind of see videos. I've been following this account, Rugby for All, which has shared videos of women's elite rugby players showing support for trans players who aren't on the team anymore. And at the lowest level in Division III, they're simply ignoring the ban. So it's definitely an interesting time.
Is there a level in between elite and Division III?
Yeah, there's Division I, there's Division II. The Ferals are Division III in part because they started in 2024. It's just a new team, and something that I sort of, for the last week, I've been kind of defending the integrity of my reporting online. But something I sort of tucked into my online sort of addendum is that before the Ferals were created, there were women who were interested in playing rugby, who had played rugby for a long time, but they were just playing on the men's team because there was no women's team to accommodate them. There was no women's team within the literal borders of Baltimore City, and they were looking, and so they just played men's rugby against a lineup of 15 men. And when there were enough women to create a women's team, they created one in 2024, but they actively recruited members of the community. I mean, rugby is traditionally a very queer inclusive sport. Val Paizo, the president of the Flamingos at the time, made it a point to go out and look for trans women who might be able to play because Val is trans and is a trans man and has kind of wanted to make a culture and a home for trans people within the Flamingos organization.
All right. And the Flamingos, are they based out of Maryland as well?
Yeah, the Flamingos is sort of the parent organization, if you can imagine. So the Flamingos are over all of this. So within the Flamingos, there's 2 men's teams and 1 women's team. So there's the Fierce, the Filthy, which are the men's teams, and then there's the Ferals, which is the women's team. They're all under the Flamingos umbrella.
You gotta love the name. I mean, you gotta love the names. Okay, all right. And do I have this right that when the edict came down from USA Rugby in February, that there were 4 trans women on the Ferals team?
Yeah, and so this is Rugby 15, so the starting lineup is always 15 players. Usually, they'll have 3 or 4 or 5 subs, or people who are sort of players who are hurt. I mean, because injuries are really common in rugby. One of the pictures that we have as one of our lead images was one of the players who broke their nose in the middle of a competition on the knee of a Frederick player. So this is rough. I mean, it's an accepted piece of the sport that it's rough, it's contact. I, as a sports columnist, I was kind of looking for. This really started because I realized when in February 2025, when Donald Trump signed an executive order banning trans women and girls in sports, I realized I'd been a sports writer for a long time, but I didn't know any trans women athletes.
I did not. Okay.
I had not met any. I kind of went out looking for some looking for a team that had trans women, and this was the team, and we kind of leaned into it because it is a rough sport. We kind of leaned into the players that we wrote about because they were former college athletes on men's teams and had transitioned. And we're sort of Jessica Gallagher, who was my photographer, but was very much a partner in this, we looked at, okay, how does this work? Just trying to answer basic questions that I'm a straight man kind of who didn't know any trans athletes. So it's sort of like, okay, how do hormones work? This trans player is fast. Like, why do you think that is? Trans player is strong. Like, is that related to, is that physical difference related to their birth gender? And we spent a lot of time within the team talking to the trans players, the cisgender players, just kind of talking everything out and really kind of going at it devil's advocate style of like, okay, well, like, if this player is really fast, like people are going to say this is because their assigned gender at birth was male. And, I had coaches talk to me, they're like, well, this is Division 3. They're not any faster than the fastest players in Division 2. They're not any faster than, they're not any stronger than the strongest players in Division 1. Like, it's just, there's a range of biological differences. It's hard to tell what has root in what, especially when a lot of these women are taking hormones. They have dramatic strength and athletic decreases, which is a study that I cited in the article as backed. So it's really hard to tell, like, okay, is this, your gift? Is speed your gift? Is speed related to your birth gender? I think what's really the point of the story I wrote and the team that I learned about is that they're like, you know what? Bring what you have, be on our team. You're welcome here.
Well, so hold on. I want to get to the rest of your reporting.
Sorry, I know I'm going ahead a little bit.
No, Kyle. No. You're doing great. But I need to make an observation. Okay? All right. In the segment right before this, I talked about the suicide of a 16-year-old trans girl in Idaho, living in a state in Idaho that is incredibly oppressive to the trans community. And in a state where people don't care, they're not curious at all about what it means to be transgender. And the observation I want to make right now, based on what you've already said, and we've been in this interview, barely 10 minutes, is that you were curious. You had respectful curiosity. You had a willingness to form relationships, to hear life stories, because it comes out. I mean, your piece it's a fascinating piece of what you wrote. And I want to say thank you, okay, to you. And I want to say thanks to Jessica, your reporter, right? Or your photographer.
Our photographer, yeah.
I want to thank both of you for having, the willingness to get to know, trans people and to see them as who they truly are. I mean, they're just humans, right? Okay. Now back to your reporting. As you talked about, there's one of the trans women that you highlighted in your piece, and I don't recall her name, who told you because of the hormones, because of what she was taking, she had lost like what, half or a third of her ability to bench weight.
Yeah.
And
Evie Clay is the player's name, who has come up a lot in the discussion as people try to parse what happened to the team over the course of a year and a half while we were reporting. Evie was a Division III lacrosse college player for a men's team.
Right.
Knew that, had an inkling that something was different about her, went abroad and decided to transition, started living as a woman. It's like, oh, this is, much more authentic. Yeah. So this is like kind of central though. Like people, I just want to emphasize to people, like we leaned in hard to understanding, okay, this person is an athlete. This person has very clear athletic gifts. Evie, in a lot of the games and practices I saw, was the fastest player. So I'm talking to her coaches, like, why is that? Why do we think that is? Like, because people are going to watch this and say, oh, that person was assigned male at birth. That's why they're so fast. And what Evie said, I mean, we sat down for an hour one day and I just sort of, politely, but just kind of unloaded every question I've ever had. about transitioning because I just didn't know because
Sure.
it's not, generally considered polite conversation. And she's like, "Hey, like I worked my ass off for that." The quote is in the story. And her coaches, two different coaches who were cisgender women, told me if players trained like Evie, if players worked out and worked at their speed and went to the gym like Evie does, they'd be as fast and as strong as Evie. And she's not the strongest player. I mean,
Right.
she's still short, can still get eaten alive by a bigger tackler. Just really fast, hard to catch. And definitely an athlete, but in her coach's opinion, the difference was that she trained, she conditioned, she worked on her speed. When they recruited her, she was a rock climber, just in really good shape. And at the Division 3 level, when you're competing against people who, may not have played a team sport before, that makes a huge
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, if I can't pinpoint what the physical difference is and what I can't sit here and say like Bartender had no influence on Evie's ability, but what I can say is her coaches said her training and conditioning was the most important piece. She was not any faster than higher division players who were cisgender women, and that teammates and opponents supported Evie
Yeah.
when this ban came down.
Well,
And that I can say.
well, I mean, as your reporting is, I mean, the ban comes down, the Ferals and other teams, in Division 3 are like, we're not going to follow the ban. And the trans women continue to play on the Ferals and other teams. Am I right about all of that?
Yes.
And under the rugby rules, a team could you could be reported for having a female trans athlete on your team, but the only people that can report that they're not outsiders, okay? Unlike the way
Right.
high school sports goes, where you've got these folks who have agendas who are going to games, making a big deal about, they might not even have a connection at least to the high school at all. But for the rugby, it's got to either be a coach or a player to make a complaint about a trans player on the opposite team, and nobody's doing that. Nobody's complaining. They're just accepting the trans rugby players. Do I have all of that right?
That is right. And this process was described to me in abstract by the CEO of USA Rugby. And I say in abstract because there haven't been any games forfeited. So you can assume one of two things. One is that there hasn't been an incident where anyone has felt is reporting worthy, or trans women aren't playing at all. And that's trans women are playing.
Yeah.
Like I have to tell you.
We've got
And
photos.
like the interesting thing I think about this, and this week has been kind of tough for the team. We knew there would be backlash. JK Rowling subtweeted us yesterday. That
Oh
was a
God.
thing that happened. And but what I challenge people to do is, like, a lot of times when we talk about the fear of trans women playing in women's sports, we talk about, oh, it puts the other women at risk. It
Yeah.
takes away the opportunity for the other women.
That's
I
what Justin.
challenge
That's
you
what
to find a victim in this situation.
Well, that's what
It's
Justice Kavanaugh wrote in his, opinion about trans athletes last month.
right,
It's
right,
about the lost
and
opportunity. But
but
you're
in this
finding,
situation,
go ahead. Go. I don't want to interrupt you. Go
no,
ahead.
no, I mean, in this situation specifically, the lowest level of rugby, I challenge you to find a victim, a woman who is saying, I mean, this is an entire league. We're talking about the Flamingos, the DC Revolution, Frederick, Severn. Frederick only has one trans player who barely played in any of the games.
Right.
But this is majority cisgender women, majority women who were women at birth. And I think what's disarming for a lot of the people who are hunting for critiques of the story is there's no victim. Like the victims were the players who felt like their agency was being taken away by this ban, who felt like their inclusive community was being ripped from their hands because of political pressure. And I think it's disarming for some of these folks who are just looking for, okay, what women are getting hurt? Well, like, I'm sorry, like, these are women who agreed. These people are a part of our community. We will compete with these people. We'll compete against them. We will take our hits from them. And I just think it's kind of very disarming to especially people who accuse me of not listening to women. I'm like, most of the people I talked to for the story were cisgender women. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know how to respond to that, because most of the people I talk to are women who were women when they were born. And it's just odd that point of view is just totally discounted by the criticism we faced in this last week.
Well, I want to get to that in a second, but I will note for the record, when the Ferals, who have 4 female trans players, played Frederick, that has 1 female trans player, Frederick creamed the Ferals 70-5. I mean,
Right.
so having those trans women on the team for the Ferals made absolutely no difference whatsoever. Okay, let's get to. I've got a couple minutes here. We still have some time. Tell me about the backlash, because I wondered about that. I mean, your piece dropped on Monday. What has happened? I mean, obviously, I reached out to you immediately because that was a thing of support and of, thank you for doing this story. I want to get it out. But what kind of other reactions have you had other than J.K. Rowling?
I mean, the ugliest thing. I mean, I have been around a long time. I've covered LeBron James. Last year, I wrote a column that got a lot of attention about John Harbaugh should be ashamed of visiting the White House because of the Trump administration. That I'm used to getting rocks thrown at me online.
Okay.
The thing that I find ugly is people who use that thread to post old pictures of our subjects.
You mean they're dead photos.
They're dead pictures, they're dead names. But I want to point out something. We talked about this before publication. We talked about this possibility. Talked about
with the team members, with the trans
with the team members.
Yep.
We talked about, is it safe? Is there a way to protect your identities? And what we kind of came out of that process from was 2 things. One, if people are determined to find dead pictures and dead names, they will.
Yep.
And pseudonyms don't stop them. But 2, those women stood 10 toes down and said, this is our story. We're doing this. We are defying this ban. We're out there, because they believe that it is the ban that is unjust, not that the fact that they're playing. And I would like everyone who is accusing them of hiding something to really think about, they put their names out there. They put their pictures out there. They wanted to be seen. And they, obviously it's hard for trans people to see dead pictures, dead names. I understand that. But they knew that was a consequence, but they thought it was important to tell about what they're doing and what the real effect of this ban is.
Kyle, I've got to go, but I've got to tell you, you're exactly right with what you just said at the end. It is incredibly important for us to hear this story about allyship, about people caring, and as I said, about journalists, okay, willing to do the hard work of getting to know our community, okay? Unlike the New York Times, that isn't even willing to interview a single trans athlete. Okay, Kyle, great reporting in the Baltimore Banner. Just Google Kyle's name, Kyle Goon, and just you'll be able to find the piece about trans rugby players. Kyle, thanks for being on The Illegal Trans Woman. I'm thrilled that you were here, and thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, all right, listeners, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to continue the story about a horrible death and suicide. of May in Boise. We'll be back in a second. And we're back. Ellie Krug with the illegal trans woman. Kyle Goon, listen, what you just heard was journalism in the highest possible degree, because it was about curiosity and investigating and about, seeing the people you're investigating as humans and providing them with dignity, okay? But it was uplifting, okay? And we needed that uplifting because now I have to finish the story about May Pollard. I have to finish it. And I'm sorry about that, but this is such an important story. It really is. Okay, so here's the rest of the story about May. On either late January 26th or early January 27th of this year, May Pollard took her life. When the police arrived at May and Elise's home, they asked Elise if anyone had wanted to harm May. Elise answered, quote, "A lot of America," unquote, wanted to harm her daughter. However, Joseph, May's father, was far more direct about what happened. Joseph's father said, quote, "There's a huge amount of animosity every single day thrown at trans kids," he went on to say, with his voice rising. Quote, "The whole effing country, the whole effing administration, every single effing day," unquote, wanted to harm his daughter. The lawsuit that I told you about, filed by Lambda Legal, had to end because May Pollard had died, so she was no longer a plaintiff, and the other high school student had graduated. So Lambda Legal no longer had parties for the lawsuit, and they had to dismiss the lawsuit in federal court, the lawsuit challenging the bathroom ban, okay, that ultimately was a big factor in May Pollard taking her life. They had to dismiss that lawsuit. And when the lawsuit was dismissed, Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador celebrated. He called it a victory for the state of Idaho. He declared, they had won. But the AG didn't even acknowledge that one of the two plaintiffs had taken her life. Didn't even give her the dignity, or her family, some acknowledgement that the law that state had passed had contributed to the suicide of May Pollard. May Pollard's story is tragic, and it is so representative of the harm, the utter harm being wrought by Trump and his sycophants. No doubt, I have no doubt that more young and some older trans people will die because of the constant barrage of messaging that trans people are lesser and unworthy of basic human dignity and rights. So listeners, please, if you know of a transgender person, okay, tell them, write to them, tell them that they matter, that they have value, that they are worthy. Help them get to a therapist if they don't have one. If you are an adult trans person listening to this, dial 988 if you need to go to the emergency room if you're thinking about suicide. You can reach out to me at elliekrug@gmail.com. I'm not a therapist, but if you need a shoulder or if you need an arm, okay, all right, or an ear, reach out to me. Someday, all of you listening, okay, someday it will get better. We just have to stay alive for it. Can please stay alive for it. Take a break. Ellie Krug with the Illegal Trans Woman on AM 950 and WCPT 820 Chicago. Okay, three things for Random Acts. Random Act number one, May Pollard's story. Okay, it reinforces why I'm going to Idaho Falls and Boise for 3 days in August. That I am so incredibly angry. Okay, the waste of such a precious life, even more so. This is why I need to be in Boise, why I'm going across the country speaking about what it means, how you can be good to all humans, particularly trans people. Item number two, last weekend, I went to Monticello, Minnesota. Now, Monticello is about, 45 miles west of Minneapolis. So it is in what's called Greater Minnesota. Okay, this is not a blue area, but for the last 4 years, the Wright-Sherborne Pride Association, Wright and Sherborne County's Pride Association, has been putting on a Pride event. You know, and on Saturday morning, I got up. I knew that we had to do it. For me, it's a 40-mile drive from where I live in Victoria. I did not want to do it, okay? I got other, but I'm like, Ellie, you're sort of a leader in the community. I also knew some people that I thought would be up there, and I wanted to go up and support them. So I went up thinking I'd be there for, maybe 20 minutes. I was there for an hour and a half. And instead of maybe the 10 booths that I thought I'd see, there was somewhere in the vicinity of 30 different booths from all kinds of different organizations. 8 to 10 of them were from faith organizations, from churches. And I got to see some people I knew, people who had heard me speak, people who believe in the work of Ellie Krug. And I got to tell a whole lot of people there, thank you for being there. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I handed out my card to many of the faith organizations saying, hey, if you want a speaker, a pro bono speaker, I'd be more than willing to come and speak. Let me know. I also found a therapist whose half of her practice in Rogers, Minnesota, half of her practice is for trans people. Okay, she'll be on my show. She'll be on this show in August. All right, so it gave me hope, okay? I mean, this show has been emotional. It's been a roller coaster. Please take some hope from that. This is Greater Minnesota. They put on this Pride event on a Saturday afternoon. I had to park 5 blocks away, okay? All right, last item, Random Acts. On Monday of this week, I filed to again run for school board as a director of Eastern Carver County Schools. And so that means I'm going to have to door knock. That means I'm going to have to raise money. That means I'm going to have to do all kinds of things. But you know what? I'm doing it. I only plan to serve one term, okay? And I got elected in 2022. I had planned to be done in 26. But I did not plan on Donald Trump being elected again and him coming after the school districts, the education system, coming after LGBTQ plus students, coming after particularly trans students and educators. I hadn't planned on that. And I need to be there. So I'm running again. A big thanks to my producer, Adam, who's had to do a little bit of jockeying today. I appreciate it, Adam. Thanks so very much. And to you, my listeners, okay? Please share about this show, this particular show. Please share about it because we gotta stay alive. We do. I care about all of you. Between now and when you hear my voice next, go out and do something good for someone else as well as for yourself. Ellie Krug, over and out.